And I feel like as a Beaumont City Council member leader, who are we as a community to say any city is better than ours? I'm a firm believer of Beaumont can be whatever the people who live here chooses for it to be.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beaumont Beat video podcast, where we move with the heartbeat of the city. I'm your host, Tracy Koenig. I'm sure you've heard by now, Beaumont is holding its first bond election in 43 years, and that's before many of you were even born. So it's a first for many of us here, and it's important to understand how it works, what it means for our community, and for you individually as a homeowner. So today, we're tackling some of the most common questions and concerns about the upcoming election, and hoping to clear up some of the misinformation as well that's out there. And to help us navigate it all is Beaumont's Mayor Pro Tem, A.J. Turner, and the city's Economic Development Manager, Christina Lokey. They're going to be joining us to break it all down for us in just a moment. But before we get into all that, I have a quick announcement for you. The Beaumont Fire Department is proud to join cities all across the nation as a part of Project Firebuddies. Now, this is a program meant to bring joy and to support children battling terminal illnesses. And the city is hosting its first ever fundraiser with a cocktail party Saturday, October 11th from 6 to 9 p.m. It's at 434 Fannin Street. And you can check out BeaumontTexas.gov/firebuddies for tickets and more information. Okay, let's get into today's bond conversation, and thank you both for joining me, by the way. First off, let's walk the voters through how each of these projects were identified and prioritized. How did they get on the ballot?
I think the most important thing is to talk about the deep and Dell history of how all this came about. And it kind of started with a strategic plan back in 2021. And the strategic plan, all we did as a council is we identified the key issues and concerns that were in our community. And those were infrastructure, quality of life, public safety, economic development, and so on. So we had a list of items that were issues in the city of Beaumont. And after we put that list of items together, a consultant came in and helped us group those items and prioritize those and put them in different categories and buckets. After the consultant came in, then we formalized a committee. And when the committee was formalized, guess what? Council turned over. So literally, we started the strategic plan with one mayor. We ended the strategic plan with another mayor. And then a new council came on. And when a new council came on, we put the committee together to kind of identify these projects where initially it was over billions of dollars. But this committee came together, these 17 people that we all appointed, and to take it a step further, when a new council came on, some committee members were removed because new council members wanted people who represented them. So the new council members came on, made their appointments, and then they identified roughly $210 million that we would move forward. They grouped these propositions, but it doesn't end that way. The council still has full autonomy and authority to make changes, add things, and finalize it, because the buck stops at council, and that's what took place.
And also, we do want to mention that they did do a survey of the community, because initially infrastructure didn't have as much on there as it does now. So they took that into account, right?
Well, yes, and more importantly, all of these bond meetings are actually available online, and you can watch them from start to finish, including having access to every one of the presentations that the committee was able to see. More importantly, these projects came from a community investment plan, which is very similar to a capital improvement plan. And what that is that it showcases all of the projects the city has slated for the next 5 years, whether that be in drainage, in streets, facilities, downtown development, the list goes on. And not only were we able to utilize the capital improvement plan or community investment plan, but we also were able to use the ParksMasterPlan. It is really unique because the strategic plan identified the lack of money and funding into our park structure. And so by utilizing this ParksMasterPlan, it's over 80-page document that identified all of the needs currently in assessing our parks and the conditions, whether it would be instilling it handicap accessibility or upgrades.
Okay, now we talked about some of the items then and how we got to where they are now on the propositions, but a lot of people have questions about how they're grouped, particularly when it comes to the multipurpose center being in with our public safety, and that's gotten a little bit of questions there. So let's try to explain that a bit.
What I love about that is ultimately we as council members, it's our obligation and duty to work together to make this city the best team for the city of Beaumont. And that's exactly what we did when it came to these facilities. I won't get into dates, but what I will do on my own platform, I will further go into detail and dates of every council meeting, every meeting starting in 2021 to where we landed when we finalized everything around mid-August. I will show every date and highlight what meetings took place and what suggestions were made and how did we land on this. And I would love to do it like that because it's too much in-depth detail to discuss it in this short amount of time right now. But I will do it on my personal page because I think it's important that we show that level of transparency on how did we land here. And really, it's our job as a council to work together to kind of reach a common goal, and that's what we did. And we work with the community. Like I give you an example, you guys stated earlier, a lot of the infrastructure originally was not in Proposition A. It wasn't local streets. But once we started hearing from community and neighborhood associations, their concern was we want to see some of our local streets that are in disrepair actually be a part of this bond. We want to see some of our drainage that is in disrepair be a part of this bond. But they also said sewer. That's when it gets kind of in-depth detail because our sewer is paid for through our enterprise fund, which is a private fund. And that's when we kind of get into how complex government can be and how in-depth is spending and where the funding has to go. And that's where we kind of landed. So we have drainage and local streets now when originally it wasn't in the initial bond proposal.
Well, and I think what's important is to understand why it wasn't all included. You know, if any of the propositions were to not pass, the city would not be able to issue debt for any of those projects for up to 3 years. So you have to understand why maybe a public works director wouldn't be so willing to put out all of these major projects that potentially we wouldn't be able to wait 3 years, you know, for the city not to have. And more important than that, I think we have to see is that the reality is simple. You know, the bond committee overheard all of these projects and they saw the importance of a police department. But at the time, there was a notion of $100 million and 12 acres that was needed there. They also heard about the multipurpose complex. They heard about fire station number 4. They did not hear about fire station 8 or 10 because it was not included as a part of the community investment plan. And I think that's where everything goes back to.
But I have to chime in because I came on council in 2021, and that same fire station was in the community investment plan when I originally came on council. Mm-hmm. And the way I looked at it is if it was additional things that needed to be added, it's been 4 to 5 years. Why hasn't it been brought forward and put forward? And I'm not saying that we don't need to address all things, but let's follow the process and work the process. And to kind of further extend on what Christina said, once you approve a project, it has to be budgeted. That's 1 year. Once it's budgeted, it has to go out for a request for proposals, which you have to get qualified people to actually bid on the project to do the work. That can take up to months. Once that's done, you have to actually allocate the funding to the contractor to do the work. And that can take up to a year to a year and a half. So to get anything done on a local city government level, it takes major projects a minimum of 3 years.
Right.
3 years.
Okay, I really want to get back to this being under Prop B, though. Explain to the citizens why the multipurpose center deserves to be in Prop B.
Initially, it was only looked at as only sports, but when originally the council talked about it in 2021, we talked about co-op classrooms to do partnerships with Lamar University and industry to actually give these kids opportunities in life to get ahead and see what's next once they graduated. We talked about all kinds of programming that we would run out of it. And recently, we even had the Boys and Girls Clubs of America approach Beaumont about operating out of our facilities when they seen what we were trying to do. And I don't mind saying that because we just had a meeting with all stakeholders and leaders in the community about them coming. And I did announce it on the record at the city council meeting. But the sports tourism was a big impact in our reasoning why, because when we looked at our tourism in Beaumont, which is the revenue coming to Beaumont, baseball, youth baseball, and birding were leading at 1 and 2. And why not utilize what's working? Parents are packing their kids up and their families up to go travel and play sports. So it made sense to have this type of facility because it's actually working and it's proven. The only facility close to what we're trying to do is way in Austin. So it's nothing between Austin and currently where we're at that's doing this. And the only aspect of it is like, why don't we utilize this facility for just more than sports? We initially talked about this in 2021. We want to run programming. We want to run literacy programming for our kids to help the scores at BISD go up. At the end of the day, we always say these parents, need to do a better job, but these kids don't choose their parents. They don't choose who they go home to once they get out of school. And a lot of these parents are working multiple jobs simply to make ends meet.
The truth facts to what AG just said is simply this. $392 million was spent last year in the visitor economy alone. And more important than that is that during the RFP process, any amount over $50,000 must have over 4 council members' approval. And that is not based on just the city manager being able to account or allocate an RFP to just anybody. So we have to understand that there already does exist oversight within the city of Beaumont.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the economic development part of that coming up in just a minute. I want to get now to the local media. There's been a lot about the bond so far printed in local media. What do you think the media, how are they shaping this whole narrative and the conversation around the bond, in your opinion?
I go back to growing up and being raised in the city of Beaumont, Texas. I always knew that this city has always had a biased media. And I think being in this role and over this bond, I've never seen how prevalent one side of the conversation has been.
Why do you think that is? Explain that.
Unfortunately, it's because citizens only have time for sound bites, and they don't necessarily give themselves the time for the full transparency to look up the facts and the information themselves. We've continued to be compared to BISD, which is not the city of Beaumont, and more importantly than that, been accused of doing things that the city really hasn't had any history of doing. If you go back, or please pull any open records request in which the city has found misappropriations or the lack of lying to constituents or giving funding for something other than is being used. The city doesn't have that history. The county and BISD may, but I think it's difficult sometimes for citizens to realize that the city of Beaumont is not BISD and it's not the county.
And you think those are the number one concerns? What kind of concerns are you hearing, AJ?
I think for me, being born and raised in Beaumont, I understand the culture of Beaumont because things happen that are bad that we talk about in our pockets, but we don't sit down and talk about it with people who may think completely opposite of you. I'll use BISD, for example. At that time, I was a sophomore in college. I was getting my education, but we're still talking about something that was literally 17 to 18 years ago because we weren't adults or professional to talk about it at the time it happened with opposition. I think dialogue, when we have difference of opinion, if we can sit down and talk about it, we can understand why each other's perspectives are the way they are. And one thing that I've learned from the BISD situation was, things went wrong with funding, but the oversight over it, oversight committees and different things of that magnitude are being specific in where dollars are going, not lumping things together. I've learned valuable lessons in how I'm handling this situation in comparison to what I've seen in the prior situation, was almost 20 years ago. For example, with streets, we didn't say we would fix streets in Beaumont. It's actually specifies what streets will be addressed. And that's one of the issues that I've seen with BISD, from being able to sit down and listen to the residents, some of their concerns. You have to be able to listen as an elected official to make proper decisions. Another thing, with Ford Park that happened when I was in high school, like literally I wasn't even eligible to vote when that came about, but listening to citizens, it could have been a great idea and intentions were definitely probably in the right place and right. But ultimately, when you're dealing with multi-million dollars, you always should, as an elected official, bring it to the voters.
Yeah, and the trust is so critical, especially when you're talking this much money and people's taxes. But there are some laws that have changed. Let's talk a little bit about some of the safeguards that are in place to protect our voters' taxes.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, it's the ballot language. I mean, we have to understand that the ballot language that gets approved by the Attorney General becomes what is the laws and regulations on that funding and where that funding can be spent. And so while there may be some possibilities of movement happening within an individual proposition, it's not necessarily allowing for movement to fund a completely separate project that hasn't been mentioned at all.
And there has been a lot of education to point out to how much money will go to each project. So there will be accountability there as well.
Well, and again, BeaumontBonds.com and the City of Beaumont website. It's incredible to see just how much each project has indicated an exact value. And not only have we outlined exactly what those projects are, but we've ensured that there's contingency funding to allow for project managers and bond managers to oversee that the spending is not only fair, but more importantly, using things like CMAR, which is Construction Managers at Risk, which allows for the projects to be funded and allocated in this manner. I'm going to simplify it. So we're going to say that the police station, you as a construction manager have $50 million, and that's going to be the cap as to what this police station costs. So if something happens tomorrow and the price of wood has tripled, you're going to know that you cannot exceed that $50 million, and you're going to do with what you can with that funding. And so I think that what's really encouraging about this is that while the city of Beaumont may not have seen a bond in 43 years, many other cities have, and there's already safeguards and new legislation that has just been approved that allows for more oversight and to follow the law. The city of Beaumont is not going to be able to do anything against the law, and those laws exist.
Okay, and also I want to mention, AJ, in council meeting, these projects are going to have to come to you to show progress, right? And there's also open records, so people can always do an open records request for any of these projects, right? And that's something that the council will hold those who are working on each of these projects.
Yes, ma'am. Not only is it going to come to us, you have heard a sentiment throughout council for a form of oversight. So currently, me and the mayor and city manager as well as council members are looking at ways that we can put this oversight committee that is acceptable to actually look at things and actually recommend them to city council. To give you an example, with our planning and zoning, before anything comes to city council, it goes to planning and zoning. Once it goes to planning and zoning, they make a recommendation either to support or deny it coming to council.
Right.
And it's not often at all. I almost think since I've been on council, almost everything that their recommendation has been, it has aligned with the role and what council has done. And that's the level of transparency that we're looking to go with towards this bond.
So possible advisory committee to oversee the funds.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Similar to the history of what we've seen happen in Beaumont, we're trying to put these stipulations and things in place to make sure we're being overly transparent with the community. And to take it a step further, we do have an audit committee in the city of Beaumont. To be honest, I serve on the audit committee as well with our mayor and council member Corey Crenshaw. So not only do we have that level of oversight we're looking to do with a committee, but we also have council members who sit in with the auditors, and we can ask any question we want to ask, and it's open. We literally audit the records, we audit the finances, and since I've been on council, every year the city of Beaumont has came back with a clean audit. Regardless of what's campaigned and what's said, the facts are the facts. We've came back with a clean audit every year since 2021 I've been on city council.
So you can look at the viewers right now and assure them that their money will be spent on these projects exactly the way that they are set up.
Yeah, I assure them that we will put all stipulations in place, and we're still open to even more. If it's additional things you'd like to see, here's your opportunity to communicate with your council members to what would you like to see to make this thing more transparent? Anything you're willing to tell us, we're open. It's our job as elected officials to represent you guys and move in a way that you guys see fit. And an audit committee is something we have consistently heard of, as well as a committee to oversee things. So it can be recommendations made to us versus council members specifically making decisions to move forward. And I'm okay with that type of transparency because I signed up for it. My end objective is to make Beaumont the best city I ever could make it, and anything I can do to make citizens feel more confident in it, I'm willing.
And I think just to add to that, remember the staff of the city of Beaumont, because this staff is working tirelessly, adding more hours from this bond, and more importantly, they care about the future of this city. So give the staff some credit, because we are all working diligently to ensure that your needs and all of your concerns are not only addressed, but to ensure that we actually get to the finish line, because that's our goal for a better Beaumont and a stronger future.
Okay, we're going to get to some more important questions in just a moment. But first, another quick announcement. Oktoberfest is this Saturday. Take a look.
Celebrate fall at the City of Beaumont's 10th Annual Oktoberfest at Rogers Park, October 4th. This special milestone celebration with German-style beers, tasty food trucks, and live music from the Golden Triangle Brass Quintet. Running on credit and headliner Madame Radar. Families join in with Kidtoberfest activities with face painting and more. Mark your calendars, October 4th at Rogers Park. More info at BeaumontTexas.gov. Brought to you by the City of Beaumont with support from Del Papa Distributing and Education First Federal Credit Union.
We can't wait to see all of you out at Oktoberfest. And as always, you can stream this show and past episodes of the Beaumont Beat on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to our channel, like this episode, and share it with others so they too can enjoy it. And we're always looking for new topics, so drop us a comment to let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes. All right, now back to our conversation with Beaumont Mayor Pro Tem A.J. Turner and our Economic Development Manager, Christina Lokey. I want to get back to the sports complex because I've seen some people kind of referencing Ford Park and worried in that sense. How does this compare to Ford Park and what we have out there, and how will it be different?
Well, the number one thing is when we hear Ford Park, awfully some negative connotations are tied to it. But the reality is, I as a citizen have utilized Ford Park in the past. I brought shows like Frankie Beverly and Maze. I did a show at one point with 2 Chainz, Yellow Beezy, and Lil Baby, which are some of the biggest, entertainers in the world. But I've utilized that facility to do a various of things because it's an asset to the community that I feel like is underutilized. But we're not paying attention to the fact that the number one thing in tourism is spurred from Ford Park, which is youth baseball. And I've learned through CVB, it's called indirect impact. That means when these families and these kids travel to Beaumont, Texas, they're staying in our hotels. They're eating in our restaurants. They're gassing up at our gas stations. They're stopping at Academy to grab a bat or a glove. They're going to Dick's Sporting Goods to grab some tights or whatever you need. And every time they spend money in reference to Beaumont, Texas, it comes back to the local economy. So I kind of look at what people will look at as a black eye. I look at the positive and what's actually coming from it. But in theory, the difference is it's actually going to the voters. I actually learned, and again, I was in high school at the time that this thing was built. I wasn't even eligible to vote. But I learned that the voters have to have some form of input and say so. And initially, like we said earlier, it was initially its own individual agenda proposition. But what took place is council members made a recommendation to put it with facilities because it is a facility that does more than just sports. When we start talking about the classrooms and the educational things, we have Khan Academy that we have in our libraries that we can utilize in these computers to help kids with their literacy. We have the AR situation where we want kids to come in and get AR points. We're even looking at how can we utilize this thing in the week for citizens, not just the weekend when the economic development impact part kicks in. And I kind of pass it to Christina when we go from there.
Okay, and I want to talk about that because she gets excited about this with the economic development. But tell us a little bit about how the look would be apart from the classrooms and that type of thing that Councilman Turner talked about. But the Legends facility, it would be kind of like that, right? Tell us a little bit about it.
It will. So Legends in Bryan College Station, if you haven't had a chance to look it up, it's an incredible project. Not only does it have the basketball courts that transition to volleyball and pickleball courts, very similar to what we're proposing, but more importantly, it has an esports center. And what we have to understand with esports is it's basically a room full of computers and computer monitors, and it allows for them to be able to game all at one time. But what's more important than that is that they actually utilize it so that any type of citizen during the week is able to come in and have an access to a computer and Wi-Fi and printer capabilities, which we just don't realize is not what everyone has in their household. But more to that, I think, is just the amount of reoccurring tournaments and the business that can be accumulated.
What's the potential economically there?
You know, for Legends has seen anywhere from, they were told $500,000 to $2 million per court. And they've seen very close to over $1.5 million in such a short period of time.
And you love the fact that we're located right along the interstate, which not other sports complexes.
I have to say, after spending 7 years in the Convention and Visitors Bureau, there's one thing that we've really learned is that Ford Park fields may not be the nicest or best fields that are out there, but it's the most convenient being located across Interstate 10. More importantly than that is the strategic plan. We've mentioned the strategic plan, and if you would like, you're able to see it online, or you could actually ask for open records request. And while you're doing it, ask for a strategic plan outside of the previous one or any given year. It's been over 20 years since the city of Beaumont had a strategic plan, and that's what we should be talking about. Because now with this new administration, not only do we have a strategic plan, but it's been outlined and identified for Beaumont to become a sports tourist destination, which means we had a consultant come in and look at and assess all of the pros and cons and a SWOT analysis of what the city of Beaumont had to offer. And they came to terms with the fact that if Beaumont became a sports tourist destination, it would be the most profitable and have the highest return for the city of Beaumont.
Okay.
And just to put that in perspective, Beaumont, Texas was named football capital of the world. Since I've been on council, Kelly High School has won a baseball championship. Beaumont United and Westbrook has won over 50% of the state basketball tournaments in San Antonio in the last 5 years. So that means in the last 5 years, Beaumont has went out there and competed against every school in the market in Texas, and we came out victorious. Look what Kelly did with baseball. The football capital of the world from the NFL, that was our title. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with living in our truth. And one thing that we're realizing is these parents are traveling with their kids, whether it be in gymnastics, whether it be tennis, whether it be pickleball, whether it be soccer, whether it be track. They're coming to cities and bringing their families, and they're spending dollars. And that comes back into our local economy, and we have to look at that. But we can utilize this facility through the week for the residents of Beaumont with some of the things we mentioned.
Cheerleading, baton twirling, futsal. I mean, there's so much more sports than what he just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get on to the next topic, and I want to talk about downtown. There's a lot of interest there, and the focus has been kind of the riverfront and that area. Let's talk about that and what makes us think at this point that this is the time for downtown Beaumont to grow, because there have been some people saying, Crockett Street didn't succeed and downtown won't ever be what council hopes it to be. What's your answer to that?
First off, I just want to say Crockett Street was not the city of Beaumont. And if I had one of the owners of Crockett Street in this room right now, he would tell you that management and some other issues internally was some of the reasonings why Crockett Street happened the way it did. And I want to be that frank and honest because there's so much misinformation on downtown. We hear crime. It's too dangerous to go downtown. We have to commend the planning and zoning. They have done an incredible job. Director Demi Ingman has a vacant building registry that has not only transformed what some of the downtown buildings look like, but it's secured the buildings and it's allowed for, shifts in ownership. We have about 7 buildings downtown that are owned by new owners, and they're having plans or types of, 3 to 6 years of getting them back to not being vacant anymore and getting off of that vacant building registry. So there is things that the city is currently doing. And outside of that, you have to see economic development. We say it over and over again, but truly economic development is more than just actual development. It includes jobs, ways of life, and honestly making quality of life an essential impact for the city. So,
So what's on the bond in the downtown area that will help to further those?
So Proposition D, currently right now, Riverfront Park Extension, we are looking at 2 parts. One part would be parallel to Riverfront Park. Currently right now, there's a concrete path, there's 2 pavilions, and there's a few benches and outdoor seating areas. That's it. So if you as a family were to go to Riverfront Park, there wouldn't be much more for you to do other than see the beautiful view. That's where Proposition D comes in. It's the Riverfront Park Extension. That part 1 would be parallel, would be integrated for family friendly, having some splash pads, some also additional seating, some shaded areas as well. And then the second part would actually be located adjacent to the new convention center at the 555 previous property location. And that is not only going to be fully integrated with the amphitheater that's connected to the convention center, but more importantly to that, you're going to be able to have the walkability, the accessibility to go from Riverfront Park to the downtown riverfront landing site where the hotel and convention center one day will be slated to be.
All right.
I think I have to take it a step further, because when we talk about downtown in the city of Beaumont, we're looking at a facility right behind you guys that is a City of Beaumont facility. And I would say that no one in Beaumont can't say that the event center downtown in Beaumont is not the jewel or maybe the most precious treasure we actually have in the City of Beaumont. And that was a City of Beaumont project that's not only booked up 2 years in advance. So we don't never discuss the wins that we actually have had as a city.
That did get a lot of pushback in the beginning, right?
Yeah. Oh, pushback. It was ridiculous. I like to research history. And again, in the council, if they didn't have vision and they listened to the media and they listened to social media, we wouldn't have the event center that's booked up for almost 2 years in advance. And even the same people who criticize it and critique it, they frequent this facility. And sometimes as an elected official, you got to have thick skin. You know, like if you have vision and you have the numbers and the reports to back up the vision, sometimes you have to move forward. And this is one of those processes where ultimately we're giving the voters the decision to decide what you want the city to be. It's kind of funny. I took my daughters to Riverport Park, the river cutting, and they were excited, and you know, they were going to a park. And when we got back in the car, my third grader was like, "Dad, that's not a park." You know, and I was like, "Well, what do you mean, sweetie?" She said, "All it is concrete and water, but it was no playgrounds. It was nothing that we see at parks." And, you know, the beauty of it is with my kids, we travel often to some of these other cities, and you see these splash pads. You see these, you know, you see canoeing going on. You see these magnificent playground structures. And what I'm saying is I think the citizens of Beaumont have the opportunity to decide if they want that same thing in their community that we travel to other cities to see.
Right. Okay. Now, speaking of what the citizens want, it was unanimous that they wanted a lot of infrastructure. And I've had some people ask, why is it not just all infrastructure on this bond proposition if that's what we want and that's what we need? Why other projects on the bond outside of infrastructure?
So what I struggled is when I immediately was educated on how a bond works. Again, it hasn't happened in 43 years, and I'm not even 40 years old yet. So when I was educated that if it fails, we cannot touch a project that can be in dire need for 3 years. As I stated earlier in the introduction, it takes 3 years to get a major project done. You have to budget it. You have to go out for RFP. You have to go with your contract. You have to monitor your contractor to finish the project. So that's almost a 3-year process. So imagine if a project that was slated to happen next year could be 6 years down the line just because we put it on this bond. You have to look at the immediate needs like sewer and drainage and our CARES Act funding. The city of Beaumont got $32 million of CARES Act funding, which is money from the government. You know, they brought it down to help after COVID. And what happened was we chose to take $29 million out of that $32 million, and we put it solely towards sewer and drainage. And that drastically helped with the injection and making things better. We're not where we need to be, but that was us listening to our constituents. When I first got on council, it was brown water calls almost every other day around 2021. I haven't got an email about brown water in the last 5 to 6 months, but I would say that's because the citizens communicated with council, we listened to the citizens, and we made the proper investments where the citizens felt it needed to be invested. And that's what government is all about. It's good stories. It's not always what you see on media. You know, like when I'm in a grocery store, people come up to me all the time thanking me for the senior citizen discount on water rates. It's things people actually like to see, and they say all the time, AJ, I'm not going to get caught up in the social media negativity. I'm not that kind of person because I don't want to comment because I don't want to be attacked. And that's what it's kind of turning into, unfortunately. But when you sign up for a role like this, you know, you got to go with what comes with it.
Yeah, and you did mention the 3 years. I know that Molly Villarreal, who's our Public Works Director, was hesitant to put any of these projects. Initially, she said, I have nothing to put on the bond because of that, where you are taking a little bit of a leap of faith that the voters will see it as something critically important, but there are so many projects that she does want to get accomplished, that if they were to go on the bond and not pass, then it would set us back a bit. So I think
and honestly, Molly and I kind of went back and forth a few times because, my biggest thing was ROI, return on investment. For every dollar we put on this bond, if the city could just make $2, imagine what would happen to our economy. But the city manager honestly had to put me down and remind me that, the city has not gone out for bond in 43 years, which means there is a massive list of quality of life projects like the fire station that has just repetitively stayed on the capital improvement plan over and year out because the city hasn't necessarily had the funds to fund such big projects. And, after going out for bond in the last 3 months and just the negativity on the media, I completely understand why it hasn't been 43 years. And
it's
so
a bold move, and you take a lot of hits to ask voters to increase their taxes, right?
And I think both of us, it's not about the hits. I think what we're really, the concerning factor is that there's no one puppeteering, AJ or myself or any of the directors at the city of Beaumont. Again, it's a strategic plan. It's a capital improvement plan. It's a parks master plan. It's truly having a vision and a mission within the city of Beaumont and just trying to account for that. So do due diligence and look at the facts. They're all there.
All right. Is that your number one? I was just going to ask you, what's your number one takeaway? What do you want voters to know, the number one message you want to give them before they head to the polls in November?
Well, my biggest struggle is when people say things are coming out of nowhere, and I know that time and energy we put into a strategic plan. As a council member, we had almost 8 to 9 meetings formulating the strategic plan. They were all open to the public. And again, you can go back and research from 2021, every day we had a meeting. On top of, it's been 3 different councils, completely different since I've been on council. I've never had the same 6 people serve with me in the last 3 terms. That means opinions change and people change and initiatives change. But me as a council member, I may be the youngest, but I'm the oldest in season on the council. It's my job to work with everybody, regardless of their opinion, regardless of their approach of what we can do now to make the city better. I think a lot of elected officials miss the mark on this nationally as well as locally. You campaign to get elected, but once you get elected, it's your job to work with the people you're elected with to make whatever you're representing the best you can make it. And that's what I like about this current council. We're actually working together. We can sit down and have tough conversations, even if we don't agree. We can sit down if we have a disagreement, whether it be on social media or whether it be on dais, and we can have we can go eat dinner afterwards and have that conversation. And me as one of the older ones on the council, but again, the youngest, I know the dynamics of what it looks like if you don't work together, because I have been a part of groups where you cannot agree on anything. It wasn't necessarily me because I can get something done with everybody, but I have seen it be pretty tenacious where you can't work together. And we all know in Beaumont, that's the truth about how the past has been in history with government. But you have a council that's willing to work together, listen to one another. But we have a lot to overcome because it's a lot of wounds from the history of things that has happened in Beaumont that some people aren't healed from. I kind of look at it like my marriage with my wife. If we have a disagreement, and I'm holding on to it 5 years later, the marriage will never be healthy. So you got to be able to talk through things. You got to be able to have uncomfortable conversations. You got to be that open-minded to listen to somebody who may think completely different from you and put yourself in their shoes. And maybe you can land somewhere in the middle where you can make things best for the city. You're going to have people who don't agree with you regardless of what you do. But I got on the council to work with my people and make the city better. And I refuse to stand stagnant, just because some people don't agree. I'm about making Beaumont better.
I mean, I think you said it. We've become so much more diverse. And not only are there so many different types of people here, but we're all integrated. We're all married to one another, and now their cultures have become our cultures. And that's the way you have to look at this. This is a comprehensive bond. If we were to put just 15 random citizens, line them up in a row, and ask them what was their favorite project and least favorite project on the bond, you're going to get 15 different answers. And I can attest to that because after going to every ward bond meeting, I have talked to so many citizens, and every one of them have different concerns. And it's so exciting to see people care. It's exciting to see citizens care about what is going on in the city. But they need to be informed. And the one thing that I would ask is just that you go to BeaumontBonds.com or to the City of Beaumont website, because the information you're getting from your media and your social media just shows snippets, and you deserve the whole picture. And outside of that, I would actually say it is so important who we vote onto our council. And it is so important that they learn and they know the city's priorities and they understand the strategic plan and they understand the community investment plan and the Parks Master Plan, and they read it. They don't just see it and approve it, but they read it and they learn it, because that's going to be the future for us. The future for this city is a strategic vision that's mapped out. And it's so exciting that this administration has brought this adoption of a strategic plan here. Now we have to make sure that our citizens and our council members know it and adhere to it, because that's the motion and the directors of the city of Beaumont is going in. And we all just want to be going in the right direction so that the future of Beaumont can be bright.
All right.
And I just have to say this last thing. Man, when I travel to NLC, which is National League of Cities, and you get to having dialogue with council members that are in other cities, and they start speaking on how they get projects funded and how things come to pass. The average city, every 3 to 7 years, they go out for bond and they let the citizens decide how they want their communities to look. And most of those cities who are doing that, their population is growing and they're getting attractive quality of life things in place, and people are actually coming to their cities. Just to put it in perspective, simple math, 43 years, and the average city that's growing and thriving is doing it every 3 to 7 years. Beaumont, we're behind. It's up to us to decide if we want to catch up. But we have to look at what's working in other cities. And I feel like, as a Beaumont City Council member leader, who are we as a community to say any city is better than ours? I'm a firm believer of Beaumont can be whatever the people who live here chooses for it to be. I refuse to let somebody who does not live in Beaumont tell me what the future of my community should be. And if you look at comments online and you click residents, it'll show most of the people that are negative about our community do not even reside in Beaumont city limits. And I refuse to let those people tell me, as a council member and leader, what this city will be.
All right. Thank you both so much for your time, for your information, for your heart for the city, and appreciate all that you do here for the city of Beaumont. And we want to remind you, the city's final Beaumont Bond Open House is Thursday, October 16th at the Downtown Event Center. Now, you want to join us at 6 p.m. online for a virtual event, and then at 7 p.m. in person. There's also a virtual open house online right now that will walk you through each bond proposition step by step. Just go to BeaumontBonds.com. And the most important thing, of course, is that you exercise your right to vote. Early voting runs from October 20th to the 31st, and Election Day is November 4th. Check out BeaumontTexas.gov/election for all your voting location information. And we'd love to have you join us for our next episode of the Beaumont Beat. We'll be talking with the Beaumont Fire Department about their Fire Buddies program and how you can help them spread joy to critically ill children in our community. For now, though, I'm Tracy Kennick. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Beaumont Beat, where we move with the heartbeat of the city. We'll see you next time.